For those that are just joining, I just said my name is Gillian Askew. I'm your host for today's session in association with North Yorkshire County Council. We will just wait a couple more seconds as people are joining us, and then we'll get started on the approved provider list for voluntary community and social enterprise session this morning. If that wasn't what you were expecting to hear about today, you might not be in the right place, but if it is, then do stick with us. We'll be starting very shortly. Okay, I'm going to crack on if that's all right. So as I said, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm your host today, and I'm from an organisation called Go for Growth. I'll be hosting the session as we go through. As we get to introductions, I'll give you a little bit more detail about me and Go for Growth. But in the meantime, I just want to cover some housekeeping, if I may. So the session is being recorded today. It will be available for everyone to view via the Go for Growth YouTube channel, and the slides will also be shared via the Go for Growth LinkedIn page and the North Yorkshire County Council LinkedIn page. We do have the chat and Q&A functions available for use today. If anybody would like to introduce themselves, please feel free to do so on the chat function. You will see in chat that there's a couple of options, so you can chat with everybody or you can chat with the host and the panelists only. So just make sure that you choose which audience it is that you are wanting to chat with. For any questions though, if I can ask you to use the Q&A function, that would be great. My colleague Lauren that is with us today from Go for Growth will keep an eye on both the chat and the Q&A function for us. We have set time aside at the end of the presentation for general questions, but if there is anything specific that you want to ask a question on as we go through the session today, please do feel free to use the Q&A function throughout. And we are also using this session to help us to learn about the marketplace and develop the support that's on offer. And so we also have a few questions that we'd like to ask as we go through the session today, and we'll be doing that using the poll functionality. The poll functionality is anonymous, so we do encourage you to answer the questions if you can, and obviously to answer as honestly as you can. It will really help us to learn, so please do use that if you want to. But all that remains before I move us into introductions is to say thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this morning. We know that time is super precious, especially into voluntary sector organisations. So all of us really appreciate you taking the time out to be here with us today. And we really hope that this webinar is helpful and useful for you. So if we want to get into introductions, can I hand over to Hannah to say hi, please?
Hi everyone, so welcome, thank you to so many of you for joining us. So I may know some of you, I recognise some names on the call. My name's Hannah Brown and I work in North Yorkshire County Council Health and Adult Services Service Development Team as a Strategic Service Development Manager, and one of my key projects at the moment is the re-procurement of our approved provider list. So hello everyone.
Thanks Hannah, over to you Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Wood. I'm a procurement officer with North Yorkshire County Council, and I'm the procurement lead on the re-procurement of the APLs. Like Hannah, I recognise quite a few of the names popping up. I think I've come into contact with you across the years. I've been doing quite a lot of procurements within health and adult services for quite some time. And my job's basically to ensure that everything runs smoothly and we're completely compliant with all the regulations, etc. So yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you Tim. As I said, my name is Gillian Askew, so I'm one of the co-founders of an organisation called Go for Growth. I'm a procurement professional by trade, so nearly 30 years into procurement, both private sector and public sector. But I'm also a long-standing micro business owner, and I run a social enterprise. So I guess what that gives me is the ability to have sat both sides of this equation, if you like. So our job in Go for Growth, we'll tell you a little bit about more what we're doing with North Yorkshire County Council, but our job is really to support the marketplace to find and secure opportunities for work in the public sector. Lauren?
Hi there, so I'm Lauren from Go for Growth. My role within the organisation is procurement assistant. Now I usually work as the first port of call for businesses looking to gain support and development from Go for Growth. So if any of you are interested on the back of today's session, I look forward to hearing from you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And we'll get into the main body of the session now. Over to you, Hannah.
Okay, so just a little bit of an introduction. Some of you may be familiar with some of this if you are already working with the council, but North Yorkshire County Council are currently in the process of working towards reprocuring our approved provider lists for adult social care. So we have currently got 3 approved provider lists in place for adult social care. They come to an end at the end of October this year. So we're provisionally aiming to publish the new opportunity for the new approved provider list at the beginning of June, in order that the new approved provider list can go live in terms of the new contract and terms from the 1st of November this year. Just a bit of a note there for anyone that may be seeking to begin new business with the council prior to the 1st of November. So to start actively working with us before the 1st of November, you'll need to apply to the current approved provider list, which run right up until that date. There's some live links in here. The slides will be shared as a PDF after the session, so you can get access direct to how to apply to the current approved provider list. But the focus of today's session is very much on the new approved provider lists, the opportunity going live at the beginning of June, and new contract terms coming into place from the 1st of November. So we just wanted to start with a little bit of a poll. Jill is gonna help me out here by making it go live on the screen. I don't know how to do that. So the first question we want to ask people on the call today is whether you are a current provider on the current approved provider lists. So as Jill said at the beginning, all your answers here are anonymous. It's just to help us to target our support to the market throughout this procurement process. So
thanks, Hannah. Yeah, the votes are coming in now, so we'll just give it a few seconds.
Sure.
I always think there should be some like lift music or hold music while you're waiting for poll results to come in. I think we're almost there now. Okay. That's brilliant. Thank you everybody for voting. Do you want me to move this slide on?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Jill. So just a little bit on what we're going to cover today. Obviously, as Jill mentioned at the beginning, this session has been particularly set up and targeted towards organisations in the voluntary and community sector, social enterprises included within that. What we recognised is that potentially approved provider lists are less familiar territory for the voluntary and community sector, as they might be for some of our independent sector or private sector providers. So what we wanted to do is to make sure that we were sharing information with you that enabled you to have an equal opportunity in terms of this new procurement that will be going live this summer. So what we're going to cover today is what an approved provider list is. We recognise that the voluntary sector might be more familiar with sort of grant-based or block contract-based procurement. So we want to make sure you fully understand what that is and how we as a council purchase care from approved provider lists. We're then going to cover a high-level summary of what the different categories of list will be from the 1st of November, so you understand the different types of service that we're going to be commissioning through this procurement. And then we'll also cover the other support and resources that's available. So Go for Growth, as Jill mentioned at the beginning, are providing us with a whole host of support, both to us and to you as providers in the market. So we'll cover what other support is available to you and the future webinars and sessions that will be available. And we'll also, as Jill has already mentioned, have that Q&A session at the end. So just before we move on, one more poll, just to try and gauge understanding really of level of understanding around approved provider lists. So how well do you know approved provider lists and what they do? So how would you sort of rate your current knowledge around approved provider lists and how they work? Again, I'll just give a few moments just to respond to that. Great.
Okay, I think we're done. Thank you, Hannah.
Super. So I'll just move us on to, I think, Tim. The next couple of slides are yours, so I'll hand over to Tim and go on mute. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to explain quickly what an approved provider list is, and hopefully I'm pitching it to the right level here. So an approved provider list is a pre-approved list of providers we can choose from to make a purchase. The key word there is pre-approved. And what this means is that when we need to buy a package of care, we've done all the legwork. We can move really quickly. We've established, quality. We've established that the providers that we're awarding to have the right set of skills, the right insurance levels, etc. So that pre-approval makes the purchase of the package of care quick and easy. An approved provider list will cover a defined set of services. We'll come on to that later in the webinar. And a council may have a number of different APLs in operation at any one time. It means we get the providers with the right skills having several different APLs. Providers will be required to go through an application process to be awarded a place on the APL. This will include providers submitting a price for their services in line with the specific costing model, and this will be published as part of the procurement, and we'll make it absolutely clear how you're to cost whatever services you're providing. The application process will require providers to demonstrate they meet the minimum required standards in order to be awarded a place on the APL. And we've just listed out some standards there. So basic policies, CEC registration, experience, minimum quality standards, sufficient level of insurance. We've tried to make it as quick and sort of as simple as possible, but obviously we do need to get assurance as a local authority that we are getting quality providers with the right accreditation, etc. So in order to apply to the APL, there will be some work from your point of view. Hopefully that's not going to be too onerous. We've tried to make it as light touch as possible, but there will be some forms to fill in from your side, and it will be done via an e-tendering portal. Next slide, please, Jill. So how does Nycc purchase care from approved provider lists? We have a brokerage team, and I think many of you, if you're on APLs already, you'll be aware of our brokerage team, and there is an agreed brokerage sourcing process to purchase the care. We will publish that sourcing process as part of the procurement, so you can read through it, and I'll just touch on some key points around what that process is. The council social care teams carry out a care assessment that identifies the care a person needs and from which APL this can be purchased. So, for example, the assessment may identify somebody who requires a domiciliary care package of 2 1-hour calls a day. That's just an example of what the assessment could be, the identification of the care needs, and then would use the domiciliary care approved provider list to purchase that individual package of care. The sourcing process considers best value, best match in order to identify a provider. If, for example, there's 3 providers that can carry out this domiciliary care package of 2 1-hour calls a day, we will decide it on the best value option. Obviously, as a local authority, we need to achieve best value for the taxpayer. Only providers who have been awarded a place on the approved provider list will be considered for packages of care. It's not a closed list, so once the list is procured and in place, providers will be able to join at a later date. We'll have refresh points throughout the period of the APL, but we would encourage you to apply at the outset. And lastly, and this is an important point, the approval onto the approved provider list does not offer any guarantee of work. So just because you're on the list, it doesn't mean you will get work. We hope that all providers will get something, but there's absolutely no guarantee of work through this approved provider list. And that's it from me, I think.
Well, are there any questions, Lauren, that we need to take before we move on?
No, not at this point.
Over to you, Hannah.
Okay, that's great. So what I'll just say before I start this is that this is a very high level summary of the different categories of lists that will form a part of this reprocurement. So what there will be, which Jill will cover at the end of the session, is there will be 4 service specific webinars, which we would encourage you to join as appropriate in line with your interest and skill set. So there will be 4 service specific webinars going through each of these lists in much greater detail. So I don't intend to cover the sort of intricacies of the service specifications of these lists in today's session. It's just to give you sort of that high level summary of the types of services we will be commissioning through this reprocurement. So as Tim said, these services are for people who have eligible needs under the Care Act and have had a Care Act assessment with the social worker. A Care Act assessment will determine the person's eligible needs under the Care Act and from which list the services they need should be commissioned, and then our brokerage team will use the approved provider list to source a package of care under one or more of these 4 headings. So each of these lists will have its own detailed service specification, and there'll also be a standards and outcomes framework that applies across all of these lists, which again will be covered at future sessions. So the 4 different categories of lists that we'll be procuring through this opportunity are home-based support, community-based support, residential and nursing care, and supported living. So just to go through each of those in turn. So home-based support will include all of those services that are delivered within a person's home. So that includes a combination of both regulated care and non-regulated care. So it may include personal care, which is what we sometimes refer to as regulated domiciliary care. So personal care to a person as defined in the Care Act, things like physical assistance, prompting or supervision with eating or drinking, toileting, washing or bathing, oral care, care of the skin, hair and nails. So all of those things that we think of as personal care will be commissioned under the home-based support list. We'll also commission some non-regulated home-based support through this list, so practical support, sitting services, for example. So practical support includes things like sort of provision of food, support with shopping, meal preparation as opposed to physical assistance with eating, so support to prepare meals, essential household tasks, assistance with cleaning, cleaning around the house and things like that, prescription collection, medicine, checking medicines. So not physical personal care, but practical support that takes place in a person's home will be commissioned under this home-based support list. Sitting services, again, largely non-regulated by the CQC. So that includes mainly the provision of companionship in the home. So not delivering personal care to the person, but providing that companionship within the home. And then the last category of service that we'll commission under home-based support is live-in care. So that where a person has an assessed need for care around the clock on a 24/7 basis, and that could include all of the above in terms of the types of support. But we recognise that that's quite a specialism, and there are specific organisations that deliver that round-the-clock living care. So we will commission that via the home-based support list. The second list that we've got there is the community-based support list. So that may be the list of most interest to people here, although we welcome you to consider all 4 of the lists. So community-based support will have 4 categories of service within that list. So we will commission our employment skills service via the community-based support list. So these services will deliver support specifically that enables a person with care and support needs to become more work ready. So these services will be a route to supported employment or employment for people. We'll also commission day opportunities through this list. So these services will provide a bespoke package of support to individuals on a time-limited basis, largely, to experience a wide range of opportunities to enable them to learn and develop and build on their existing social skills, daily living skills, confidence and self-esteem. And they hopefully, although we recognise not in all cases, will provide some route to mainstream community support for people. Also, via this community-based support list, we'll commission what we will now refer to as daycare. So these services will largely be for people who are assessed as having high or complex needs, and they may have a requirement for more targeted daycare provision, or may require additional one-to-one targeted support during the day to enable them to access that daycare provision. So what we've tried to do is sort of redefine our day service model to capture the range of needs that people have for support during the day. So we've categorised it into those three areas: employment skills for support with becoming work ready, day opportunities that will be bespoke packages of support for people to have meaningful activity during the day, and wherever possible support them to have access to their local community and mainstream community activities. And then that higher level of daycare service for people with more high or complex needs that might have that additional support either for one-to-one personal care or otherwise, and likely to be over a longer period of time. We'll then commission an additional support service via this list. So we recognise that some people may need additional one-to-one support in order to enable them to access some of the community-based support services. So that service will be specifically by assessment only. So where a social worker assesses that a person needs additional one-to-one support to access one of the above 3 community-based support services, then we will be able to commission that through this list as well, that additional one-to-one support to access one of the above services. Moving on to the third list then, so this is residential and nursing care, and may or may not be the list that's of least interest to people here today, but I'm making an assumption there, so not an exclusion. But residential and nursing care, we've split that down into short and long-term provision. So that's where somebody needs to go into a 24/7 residential service. It may provide just residential care, or it may provide nursing care as well if an individual is assessed as having a nursing need. So short-term provision under that list includes respite, but of planned respite for a period of time to give, for example, a carer a short break, or it may include emergency respite in the event of risk of a carer breakdown or carers going into hospital, for example. We'll be able to commission emergency respite placements for people through this list. Under short-term provision as well, we've also got our discharge to assess and step up, step down provision. So that's where individuals have previously been in hospital and they are discharged into a short-term care home placement in order to enable health and social care professionals more time to undertake an assessment of that person's long-term needs. That generally takes place over a 4-week period. It's in line with national guidance that people's assessment is better undertaken in a home-like placement, ideally at home, but if it can't take place at home, then in a care home placement rather than a hospital bed. So those discharge to assess placements are specifically for that purpose. And then slightly different to that in terms of short-term provision is step up, step down. So that's where we have placements for people to step up into to prevent them needing to go into hospital. They may just need a short period of time in a short-term placement to enable them to have that intensive support, or equally in the reverse of that, they may need a short-term placement before going home after leaving hospital, perhaps to offer some reablement type support in a safe environment before going back to their home. We've then obviously got the long-term provision, so that includes, we will commission from there our long-term placements for people that need that ongoing residential care or nursing care. We also have residential colleges as well, so that's the provision of accommodation, care support and education in a specialist college environment for young adults with special educational needs. So we'll commission those types of placements through this residential and nursing care list as well. And then the last list that we will have under the re-procurement of approved provider lists for adult social care is a specific list for supported living. So this is a new list under the re-procurement. We currently commission supported living through our domiciliary care approved provider list. And what we've recognised over time is that actually supported living is very specialist in terms of the nature and ethos of the support that's provided to people within supported living placements, that sets it aside and differentiates it from generic domiciliary care. So we will have a specific list for supported living providers under the re-procurement. So that's a wide range in housing with care and support model. There are different definitions nationally of supported living. So in North Yorkshire, we have redefined what supported living means to us as a council and a system. So what we've said is that supported living must contain both housing related support, including living skills and help to maintain a tenancy, as well as a care and support team available for a substantial amount of time to help people to live independently and meet their eligible social care needs. So we've just differentiated that from the generic home-based support services that we'll commission via that separate home-based support list. I'm going to pause there because I'm conscious I've said a lot, and that is designed to be sort of a high-level summary. There'll be lots more information on the service-specific webinars. So this webinar is really designed to bring voluntary and community sector providers up to the same level of knowledge and information as our current providers. But I'll just pause there, Lauren, to see if there is any specific questions.
There is one question, yes, Hannah, so from Claire, regarding daycare support. So could organisations interested in daycare applications consider a complementary / partner service for the unpaid family carers by way of interventions for the carer when accessing daycare?
So what I think you're saying there is that you may be offering a day opportunity or a daycare service, for example, but you may be offering a complementary or concurrently running service that provides support to the carers. And yes, you could apply. You could apply to the approved provider list for community-based support for that type of service. There will be a process webinar as a follow-up to this that will talk you through the process for applying. We're also just considering running a session in relation to the actual application document. So hopefully some of the questions around how you define your service via the application process will become clear through some of the additional support that we're putting into place. But yes, absolutely, that would fall under the community-based support list. Hopefully that answers your question, Claire.
Thank you.
Are we okay to move on to the next?
Do you want me to launch the poll for this one?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll do that now for us.
So the next, so what we just wanted to gauge interest on, just in terms of planning our future support, is whether people on the webinar today currently deliver these types of services in North Yorkshire or elsewhere. Do those service types resonate with you in terms of your current delivery?
We got lots of votes flying in, so
oh, marvellous.
That's really good. And vast majority is yes, there's existing delivery.
Great.
Okay, I think we've got everybody that's voting now, so I'll just end that.
Perfect.
And I'll move us on a slide.
And then I think we start with a poll, do we?
I think we
My
absolutely do.
serves me correctly.
It does. I will just launch that for us now.
Okay, so what I'm conscious that I touched on in some of the discussion in my previous slide was a differentiation between regulated and non-regulated care. So what we wanted to do is just gauge understanding of that from members of this webinar. How would you rate your understanding of the difference between regulated and non-regulated care? And the options are good, fair and poor there. Again, all anonymous and just designed to help us with our future support.
Cool. I think we've probably had everybody vote that is going to vote. So I will end that. Thank you, everybody.
That's great. Okay, so what I'll just say is a little bit of a caveat again at the beginning of this slide is this webinar is definitely not designed to be a comprehensive training course on the difference between regulated and non-regulated care. It's obviously an organisation's responsibility to understand the requirements of their service delivery and whether it's required to be regulated or not regulated. And there's buckets of information about that on the Care Quality Commission website, but this is just to give sort of a high-level summary again of some of the distinctions between non-regulated and regulated care. What we've done as part of the re-procurement exercise this time is actually combined regulated and non-regulated care into multiple lists. So currently we have a list for regulated and a list for non-regulated, but actually that doesn't work very well for some providers that deliver both and have to then apply to multiple lists in order to deliver the full range of services with us. So hopefully the split that we've done under the re-procurement is more meaningful, but it is still important for you as providers to understand your responsibilities around regulation. So regulation is largely about providing healthcare or personal care in a person's home. So I did touch on it in the previous slide, but it's particularly around things like physical assistance with eating, drinking, toileting, washing, bathing, dressing, oral care, care of the skin. So those things we think of as personal hands-on care that takes place in a person's home. It also includes prompting and then supervising of any of those tasks. So just kind of thinking about the differentiation and where that boundary lies in terms of the types of support you might be delivering and whether that needs to be regulated by the CQC or not. It also includes scenarios where we're managing and managing adults' money and paying bills on adults' behalf, particularly where we're conducting we're sort of managing the adult's affairs, where there's a lasting power of attorney created. And also just mention it, just to touch on there, that regulation also includes the day-to-day management or supervision of anyone carrying out any of the above tasks as well. So it's not exclusive to personal care, and again I just encourage people to do their own due diligence around that, but it's just trying to help you to understand where that line is drawn with regulation. Non-regulation, so that includes such things as household tasks, shopping, cleaning. So they can take place in a person's home, but it's not that hands-on personal care delivered to a person. What is also just important just to mention here is the importance of where the care is delivered. So where personal care is delivered in a person's home, that is regulated. But where some of that hands-on support is delivered outside of a person's home, that isn't required to be regulated by the CQC. Now, we could get into a whole moral debate here as to whether that should or shouldn't be regulated. But where the legislation lies at the moment is that personal care, if it takes place out of a person's home, it's not regulated by the CQC. Now, that doesn't mean that as a local authority we won't be bringing in a whole host of quality, quality and performance standards around that outside of a person's home. But in terms of CQC regulation, those activities delivered out and about in the community and or at daycare centres, which some of you here might deliver, that isn't required to be regulated by the CQC. Okay, so I'll just leave that there, but we just wanted to give that sort of high level distinction between regulated and non-regulated care. I think I'll take any questions on that, Lauren, and then I'll hand back over to...
There is another question, it's not so specific, but if you want to answer, I can go over that now.
I'm happy to be guided by you, whether you want to leave it to the Q&A or whether we move on.
We've had the same question a few times, so I'll leave it till the end, okay?
Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hannah. So I will come back into play. Thank you for that. It's been so interesting so far. I just want to spend a few minutes just talking a little bit about some of the further information and resources that are on offer through North Yorkshire County Council and Go for Growth, and really just to give a bit of an overview of the role that Go for Growth is playing throughout the process. So as I said at the top of the session today, Go for Growth is an organisation that is dedicated to supporting providers in the process of finding and securing work in the public sector. And that is a bit more than just about getting through procurement processes. We are really dedicated to sustainable growth. So our job is to do as much as we can to help the voluntary and community sectors and all sectors of providers around how you can take part in public sector procurements and hopefully be successful in those processes. We will and do help anybody in any sector of any size, but really we were set up and formed to help those that are most in need. And the biggest distinction we find between voluntary sector and smaller providers is resources. We know that it's really tough. Providers are really busy delivering the services that you offer, and so the procurement processes can often be a complicated, difficult and time-consuming process. And so What North Yorkshire have done is really made a commitment to supporting the provider marketplace as much as possible. And Go for Growth is trying to pick up some of the process elements of that to help support providers. So in addition to what we've done today, which is dedicated to the voluntary and community sector, we also have an event tomorrow at 10 o'clock, which everyone is welcome to register for, where actually we'll start to explore some of the things that Hannah mentioned in terms of the process of getting involved. So lots of things have changed since, if you're a current provider, since the last time you might have gone through the procurement for it. So the Your Tender procurement portal itself is now hosted by a different organisation. So it used to be hosted by Proactis. It's now hosted by an organisation called Marcel. And whilst the process is largely the same, actually the look and feel and the functionality is different. And so we're going to help providers to understand how to register if you haven't already re-registered for EU Supply, the new Your Tender system, how you might express interest in an opportunity, what that does in terms of getting documents to you. And then, as Hannah said, we will go through the application form itself in high-level detail tomorrow. As Hannah said, we have some drop-in sessions that we are hoping to dedicate one full session just to going through the application form itself in detail when it's finalised. But because Go for Growth this is what we do all of the time, we've collated lots of handy hints and tips for organisations in preparation to take part. And so you can see the link on the screen. Again, that will come out with the video and the slide deck. If you want to come along to that tomorrow, everybody is welcome. But in addition to tomorrow's event, on the Go for Growth YouTube channel, we also have videos that you can watch, quite short videos, 4 or 5 minutes at a time maximum, of how to register for EU Supply, how to set your alerts up so that the opportunities when they are advertised will come out to you, and how to express interest in those things. In any procurement, there are steps that you will go through in order to get the documents that you need and to be able to submit the bid that you want to put in. And so there's all that information available to you as and when you want it, in addition to tomorrow's event. But we've also got some one-to-one sessions that you can book. So we run them via Teams, so you can be anywhere, doing anything, and you can come and ask any questions that you would like around processes, both before and during the procurement. So if you wanted to have an in-confidence conversation with either myself or Lauren in Go for Growth, you can pre-book that at a time that suits you. And you can book a couple of sessions if you need longer than 30 minutes. And really, other than things around specification, design and pricing, anything that's related to the process. And if that were broader for your organisation, if you wanted to ask more general questions about public sector or about procurement in the public sector more generally, then feel free to use those. They are always on offer. And then starting next week, what we wanted to do was have a regular touch point with providers. What we recognise, I think, is that these sessions are brilliant, but there's a delay between getting the information today and actually then starting to write your submission for a procurement. And so we wanted to have regular touch points for providers. So every week, starting on the 18th next week, we will have a drop-in session via Zoom. You don't need to register. The sessions won't be recorded, but we will be compiling a Q&A out of them. And if we do want to record any, we'll let people know at the top of the session if it's being recorded or not. But they'll be for 45 minutes. You can come along. You don't need to stay for the whole 45 minutes. You can come, ask any questions that you've got, and then get on with your day. So the dates are on the screen, but they will run 18th and 27th of May prior to the procurement going live, which I think it's due to go live. Is it the 31st of May? It's starting, Tim, have I got that right?
We're pulling out all the stops, Jill, to launch at the beginning of June.
Right,
yeah.
Okay, so there will be sessions before the procurement is live, but then there will be also sessions whilst the procurement is live. So once you've downloaded your documents and you're reading through what you need to do for your submission, anything related to process, you can ask in these sessions. The clarification question process in any procurement will still be live. So if you had questions relating to service design, specification, pricing, anything that's non-process related, you would still continue to use that clarification question process. But anything to do with processes, documents, and how to actually submit, you can come to any of those drop-in sessions. You can come to them all if you would like to. And then, as Hannah said, we have specification webinars also via Zoom. So these will be being created this week, and there'll be one for each of the approved provider lists that Hannah's gone through in high-level detail for us today. So the first one is next week on the 19th. We have then the 20th, 24th, and 26th of May. They're largely going to last for 45 minutes to an hour each time, but there will be lots of detail around the specification. So for anybody that's really interested in being part of the approved provider list going forward, I would definitely recommend going along to those sessions for the approved provider list that you're interested in. That will be a place where there's lots of specific details. Anything to add to that, Hannah, before we move on?
What I can just say is I can just give the which of the service specific webinars will happen on which of the dates, just if people want to pop a hold the date in their diary. We have someone working quickly behind the scenes to get a page live on the North Yorkshire Partnerships website, which some of you on the call will probably be familiar with. We're setting up a landing page to hold all of this information, so that all of the links will be on there. But just to let you know which of the sessions will run when. So the first session on the 19th of May, which is next Thursday, will specifically focus on home-based support. So those services that I talked about taking place within a person's home, including personal care and non-regulated practical support and sitting services. So that's the session on the 19th. The session on the 20th will specifically focus on residential and nursing care. So those short and long-term placements where a person goes into a residential or nursing type facility, either for a short period of time or for a long-term permanent placement. The session on the 24th of May is specifically around supported living and supported living services. And then last but not least, the session on the 26th of May is a focus on the community-based support services. So just if people wanted to make a note of the dates that and service for the services that are most of interest to them, and pop a little hold the date in your diary until we get those web links out for you.
Brilliant, thanks Hannah. And as Hannah said, there is hopefully any minute now a dedicated web page for the North Yorkshire Partnership where all the information that we're talking about will be hosted. And I think there's a weekly bulletin also that goes out. The first one went out this week, I think.
There is as well. So the weekly bulletin is something that goes out to our current providers. So what I recognise is that we've definitely got some current providers on the call today. I recognise some names, but some of you will not be current providers on our current approved provider list. So you won't receive that weekly bulletin if you're not a current provider. However, all of the information that features in that provider bulletin will also be being populated on the North Yorkshire Partnerships page, which is open to anyone to access. So everybody will, from today, be getting the same level of information.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. Are there any questions, Lauren, before I run the final poll for the session?
Again, do you want to answer them at the, are we going to do one at the end again?
Are they pretty generic? Yeah, we can capture them then at the end. Okay, so I will just launch the final poll for today. And this really is just to try and gauge interest in terms of whether attendees on the call today are intending to take part in the procurement for any of the approved provider lists that you've heard about today.
just to say this is anonymous and this doesn't hold you to anything.
Absolutely doesn't. No, it
it's
really
just
doesn't.
to help us with our sort of planning and resourcing support, etc.
Brilliant. I think we've probably had everybody vote, so I will end that now. Thank you everyone for taking part in all the polls today. That was great. And I think that's it. We're over to Q&A now. So I think we've got a couple of general questions, Lauren, you said that we can answer.
Yes, so there's a number. And so the one that I last had for Hannah from Louise was whether if you provide services covering more than one category, will that require a separate application for each list?
So one of the main changes, I'm not sure whether you're a current provider list, I can't see your surname away from, but the process for joining the current APLs can be quite onerous if you're wishing to apply to more than one list. So that's one of the things that we've streamlined this time.
I think Hannah's frozen there.
Oh, have I? Can you hear me still?
We've got you back now. I think we lost you after we've streamlined it this time.
Okay, so we've streamlined it this time so that if you wish to apply to more than one list, there'll be one overarching application form where you complete all of the sort of generic information about your organisation in terms of your insurance levels, the policies and procedures that you've got in place, etc. And then there will be some service specific elements that you need to complete to tell us more about the different services that you wish to deliver under each of the lists. But what we've tried to do is streamline it so there's no duplication in having to complete multiple application forms with the same information for more than one list. So hopefully that answers your question, Louise.
Thank you. So I'll do any questions for you to answer. Next one would be then, Hannah, so would befriending services rather than sitting services be on the home-based support list?
So we had some debate over the language of sitting services. It is quite a traditional term, but it's a term that still sort of resonates with some of our social care colleagues and people that use services. But what we recognise is that there is some overlap with befriending and sitting services. How we've categorised it, and there'll be more detail in the service specific webinars, is if the service is delivered within a person's home, you would apply to the home-based support list, and that may fall under the sitting services category. But actually, if the befriending service you're delivering is out and about in the community, so you may be taking somebody, you're going along with somebody to a local swimming session, for example, that would come under the community-based support list, and it would probably be a day opportunity. So you'd be providing that support out and about in the community to enable that person to access sort of mainstream community activities. So it could fall under one or both, just depending exactly what your organisation delivers. You could choose to apply to one or both of those. Just a bit of a caveat with befriending services. So we do the services that we're commissioning via these approved provider lists are specifically for people who have got eligible care needs following a Care Act assessment. So we know that we've got lots of befriending services sort of out and about across North Yorkshire that are preventative services, not necessarily for people who have had a Care Act assessment. So that wouldn't fall within the remit of this procurement. But if it's befriending following an assessment of need under the Care Act, then it could fall under either one of those lists.
Thank you. Next one then is transport seems to be regulated. Is it appropriate to include partnership with transport in our application? So
this is where I'm probably not going to cover this in great detail here, because it's kind of stepping into the territory of CQC regulation. But transport to and from a non-regulated service is generally not regulated, and transport costs don't fall under eligible care costs. So generally a person is charged for their transport in the same way that they're charged for their meals, for example, when they attend a daycare service. So some organisations may choose to include that within their offer, but specific transport services are chargeable to the person. I'm not sure if that answers that question fully, but it's a tricky area, and it might be something that we need to pick up specifically on the service-specific webinars. We're not specifically commissioning transport services through these approved provider lists.
Thank you. Next then, where would community mental health resource centre hubs, activities and support fit in the community-based group?
Okay, so again, we might cover this in more detail in the community-based support service-specific webinar. But again, I'll just make that distinction between preventative services and services commissioned as a result of a social care assessment. So the council does have some separate contracts with organisations in North Yorkshire for the delivery of preventative community-based mental health support, including the delivery of community mental health hubs across the county. So that doesn't fall within the remit of this procurement. If somebody needs community-based mental health support following a Care Act assessment, then I would say that falls under the community-based support list, and it would be for you as an organisation to determine which service level you are offering that service under. But it sounds like community-based support, so long as it is for somebody who's got an assessed eligible social care need.
Thank you. So I've just noticed there are some questions in the chat box as well, so I'll just run over those. So what date will the opportunity be published?
So we're pulling out all the stops for the opportunity to be published the first week of June. That's what we're working towards at the moment.
Okay, and is the procurement exercise just using the supplier questionnaires, or is it a full tender?
Do you want to pick that up, Tim?
Yeah, there will be a selection questionnaire. There's also going to be an evaluation of quality. So technically it is a tender. It's above the threshold, so it is a full tender. But we're trying to make it as streamlined and as light touch as possible. But there will be, the standard questions and then an evaluation of quality as well.
Thank you, Tim. Next, then, will there be a set hourly rate? Sorry, a set hourly or daily rate for work?
So I'm not sure which list that person is referring to, but as Tim indicated at the beginning, it's what providers will be required to as part of the application process to submit a cost for their work. Okay, I can see that I think the person that's asked this question has put community-based support in the list. So there'll be a requirement. Again, this is probably something for the service-specific webinars. I don't want to get too into a rabbit hole here today with specifics. But for community-based support, organisations will be required to submit an hourly rate for their services, and they'll also have the ability to specify whether they have whether people are required to attend for a minimum number of hours for their services. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you. So next then, is there an expectation or intention to expand the types of service covered by APL to include some social care activities that are currently supported through grants?
So this reprocurement is very much phase one of a longer term transformation of adult social care services. For anyone that's been party to other webinars and care connected sessions that we've delivered as a council, you'll have heard many of us in the service development team talking about long-term ambitions for adult social care. It's something that needs to happen over a long period of time, with engagement and co-production with people that use services, and some of that will involve us considering services that we commission in different ways and whether there's better ways of doing that provide better outcomes for people. But it's almost too early for us to say what will feature in that transformation, because it needs to be co-produced with people. So yeah, that was a bit of a politician's answer, wasn't it? But it's too early to say, and it would be wrong of me to say without us having co-produced that with people that use services.
Perfect. Well, I do believe that's pretty much all we've got time for question wise. We did have a couple of questions regarding the recordings and tomorrow's session. So both today and tomorrow's session are going to be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. In regards to the slides will be linked to a PDF and uploaded to LinkedIn if you are wanting to reach those. But I do believe that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Yes, that's it. I'm conscious that it is 10:30. We've kept you all for a full hour. So thank you, Hannah and Tim from North Yorkshire. It's been brilliant to have you with us today to tell us all about it. Thank you, Lauren, for manning the Q&A. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Look out for the video on YouTube and look out for the slides on LinkedIn. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.